Welcome everybody to the very first reserve seating of 2024. Hi Rob, hi Patrick, how you doing?
Hi guys.
I'm
Hi,
getting
Happy New Year
I'm
to both
stretching
of
for
you.
this new era.
Era.
Yeah, we didn't do enough stretching in 2023, so we're starting out every
Everybody
every
stretch.
video with a good stretch.
Remember to stretch.
Be like during the opening credits, good time to stretch.
It's like 18 seconds. Like that's
Yeah,
fine.
we're not asking a lot,
In
and
fact,
you'll
all
thank
right.
us at the end of the year.
Everybody ready? Okay, ready? One,
Yeah.
two, three, go.
So, for our first episode of 2024, we are doing our annual Lumps of Coal episode. So, I'll just tee it up. What Lumps of Coal is? It's meant in kindness. It's not meant like these movies are shit and like these are our worst movies of the year or anything like that. What it means is like, for whatever reason, either financially or critically or among fans or a combination of those, these movies just didn't connect in the way that they probably were intended to. So we want to celebrate three of those movies because either one of us or all of us are fans of them. So that's what we're doing here. We're going to be talking about three different movies from 2023. And our first one is Dungeons and Dragons Honor Among Thieves. This was Patrick's pick. And obviously, it was well liked by fans and critics, but it did not perform very well at the box office, surprisingly so, because it was well liked.
I talked about it a little bit last week on our podcast, which you can, of course, hear at fthismovie.com. I just think that this is a movie born out of perhaps cynical intentions in terms of we're Paramount, we have the Dungeons and Dragons IP to exploit. The title is bad. I kind of wish they had just called it Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But I think they gave it over to the right filmmakers
100%.
who took the assignment seriously without making the movie too serious.
Mhm.
I think it's got really good performances by the likes of Chris Pine, who's ultra charming here. He's always ultra charming, but he's like got some of his Captain Kirk charm going here. I think Michelle Rodriguez is the best she's been in years. I think Sophia Lillis is great. I think Hugh Grant is maybe a little bit bored, but
Mhm.
even Hugh Grant at a 6 is like pretty good.
Yeah.
Um, I think the effects are a lot of fun. I think it takes the fantasy stuff seriously enough. I think it's got a great sense of humor without just being, last week on the podcast, JB had said that I talked him out of seeing this movie because when I first saw the trailer, it looked like action beat, record scratch. Well, that happened.
Right.
And maybe it was marketed that way. That's not the movie at all. It is not constantly trying to undermine the stuff that it's doing with like snarky self-awareness. It's a very sincere and earnest fantasy movie that I think plays really well for Dungeons and Dragons fans. Just a few that I've talked to online are like, oh yeah, this feels exactly like something a DM would come up with.
Mhm.
But I'm not a Dungeons and Dragons guy, and it played really, really well for me. It's like I won't say it's as good a franchise blockbuster as was released last year because we did have stuff like Mission Impossible, Dead Reckoning, and stuff like that. But um, compared to its box office, I think it's just seriously underappreciated.
I really like that the movie doesn't do the thing where there's the outsider character who thinks that Dungeons and Dragons is dumb. And so that's the audience's way in, where it's like, well, no, we understand this is silly, but like, Chris Pine from the opening is taking it seriously. Like he's like, oh shit, like Neverwinter, like that's crazy. Or like that guy, we gotta go fight that guy. Like he's a little rapscallion and stuff like that. But he's like, no, 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 this is the world we're in and we take it seriously. I love the idea that the lead character is like a bard. Like that's just
Mhm.
I think a really nice inversion. So no, this movie, it rules. I watched it like 2 or 3 times. It's one of the movies where like at the end of the year I just started putting it on just to like have it on in the background, and it's incredibly fun.
Yeah, I didn't really love it that much in theaters, but I think it kind of goes to what Patrick was saying because they did so much marketing for this movie when it was coming out, and so many like alternate trailers where so many of the bits were ruined by the time that I saw the movie. Like even I remember I saw like Scream, whatever number they're on, six.
Six.
And they had the whole scene of like the cemetery and talking to the skeletons, and then it was just like sneak preview next week, and I'm like, stop showing me scenes from this movie that I want to watch. So by the time I got to the movie, I was just like kind of jaded in a sense, and I agree with you, Patrick, kind of in the that marketing, it was like Justice Smith going full Bartha, and I'm just like, I just can't handle this right now. But I'm glad that I revisited it this morning. It was just what I needed today. It was very charming and fun. I love that they gave Michelle Rodriguez something to do, like a lot to do, because the Fast franchise is just like, you beat up girls.
Right.
And it's like, that's it. And I love some of the themes of the movie, which is just that you fail every time until you don't fail. And also, the thing that is holding you back is you, and things like that. I mean, like, I love that it, these are smart things to put in a movie for a mass audience, and I just really admire them for that. My only quibbles is the length, and I think it could be just a little tighter. Um, and I'm bummed that the movie didn't do better. Maybe it's just a product of having too big of a budget in order to be successful. But I don't know.
One of the major themes of the movie is like making your own family, and I'm such a sucker for movies about making your own family.
Mhm.
Yeah, it seems to be pretty well liked online, at least. Critics were pretty nice to it. It has a fan base that I'm guessing is only going to grow over time. So it's not like I need more Dungeons and Dragons movies.
Yeah.
Another one would be welcome with this cast. I would certainly watch them go on another adventure. Um, but I wish I could get more movies like Dungeons and Dragons, like special effects blockbusters that care about character and story and are sincere instead of ironic. And just, I wish as much care went into movies like this as went into this movie.
I love its kind of mall movie quality. It's definitely like the type of thing where like you walk out of the theater, you get your mall teriyaki, and then like you walk past the game store and you're just like, should I start playing Dungeons and Dragons? And then like you buy like a starter pack, and then I open it up and I see that like the instructions are more than 1 page long, and I'm just like, I'm not smart enough for this. Also, I feel like Dungeons and Dragons and Mission Impossible, and maybe this is like a Paramount problem this year, they picked bad release dates because it was just crowded. Because I think like, we saw with Christmas, like there was kind of an opening. Like Wonka kind of filled that with like getting money. But if you release Dungeons and Dragons around winter break, I mean, it would get kind of like that Lord of the Rings bump, I think, from it. People want to see stuff like this around this time of year.
Yeah.
And it's fun, and it's not Aquaman. So I think it could have done better. That's just my opinion.
But yeah, the box office oxygen was taken up by my pick, which I'll now have to explain and apologize for.
It is all
Which
your fault.
which is the Super Mario Brothers movie. Yes.
Yeah.
And I obviously, does this qualify as a lump of coal because it was this huge box office hit? I really liked this movie because I have a young child. He's got cousins and stuff that were around a lot. I've now seen the Super Mario Brothers movie about 400 times. And as you know, when you have young children, your kid decides they like a movie, you're going to see it a lot.
Mhm.
And I've now watched this movie enough times to tell you that it's real solid. It's got parts that maybe are a little obnoxious. I appreciate that it's There was some thought put into it. I appreciate that. Much like Dungeons and Dragons, it kind of feels like a Mario Brothers adventure. It uses the world in an interesting way. I mostly picked this because when I was looking at like reviews and like user reviews on Letterboxd and just stuff from like Twitter, like it wasn't like, oh, this is just like some, disposable, whatever, it's fine. People were like, no, this is like a 1 out of 5 star movie. Like this is unintelligible. And I just don't agree at all. I think the movie's incredibly well put together. I think it's a perfectly structured movie. I used this last summer in my film class just as an example of story structure. Um, I just I don't know. I like it. I can watch it. I think in terms of kids movies, I didn't like Wish. I didn't like Elemental. I think this movie is 5 times better than a lot of the kids' content that was put out this year. And except for Bluey season 3, which rules. But I just felt like I should stand up for it because I was really confused by just how completely dismissive everybody was of.
I love that you love this so much, or you like this so much. That's kind of where I kind of come into it. Like, I definitely had to kind of go into the movie a second time, assuming best intent
Right.
in a way that I maybe wouldn't if I didn't know that one of my friends likes this movie a lot. Um, I like, and I liked it on the first viewing too. I really like how they depict the obstacle course gameplay type aspects of the movie. I think it's visually inventive in that way, and it's exciting. Um, I think for me personally, like, I just have trouble getting. I have an illumination allergy.
Totally.
I haven't seen too many of their movies, but like the Grinch one I saw was like I was pacing in the hallway during parts of it because like I'm like, oh shit, I gotta go back in there and like but and Super Mario Brothers is much better than that. I also just want to ask that studios stop putting dad rock in kids movies. Just lean into being a kids movie. Like, you don't have to appeal to us. Like, it feels like you don't understand anything. For fans of Mario, and I have family members who are big Nintendo family or big Nintendo, you know, game fans, Mario property fans. They love it. This is much more closer to what they want out of a Mario movie than what I like out of a Mario movie, which is closer to Super Mario Brothers 93, which is not for them. So it's just a matter of kind of like where your fandom lies and what you're coming to the movie with.
I never played Mario. I've never been a gamer. So this movie is 100% not made for me. But like speaking to what you're talking about, Rob, like it 100% is a functional narrative and
Yeah.
a functional movie. Like I'm not into the world building and I'm not into all the references. Like when they play Mario Kart, I was aware of it because I have a kid. I have 2 kids, but one of them plays Mario Kart. Um, and so there's a lot of stuff in there for fans. I think if you're a fan of Super Mario Brothers as a game or as an IP or whatever, I think there's a lot here for you. And I think the people behind the movie were like, let's try to make it good as
Yeah.
opposed to let's just cynically make a Super Mario Brothers movie, which I totally appreciate. I appreciate that, like, it doesn't have a lot of that, the dad rock aside and some of the Zack Snyder speed ramping aside, there wasn't a ton of like that illumination bullshit or just universal animated movie bullshit where it's like, here are the jokes for the parents, the whole Shrek of it all, like here's the jokes for the parents and here's the jokes for the kids.
Like pop culture references or like
Yes,
art
it stayed
jokes.
away from all that. It was
Yeah.
like a pretty sincere Super
Mhm.
Mario Brothers
That's
movie
what I
and
like
just
about
wanted to put you in this world and let you be in this world in the same way that Dungeons and Dragons kind of does. For some reason, I'm able to find a way into Dungeons and Dragons, and I wasn't able to find a way into Super Mario Brothers. Again, it's not a movie for me, but I think it's crazy to say that it's unintelligible
it. Right.
or a 1 out of 5 movie.
It's just for me, maybe if it was in live action, I would be able to,
Yeah.
I don't know, just kind of engage with it a little bit more. Because like if I'm thinking of like Dungeons and Dragons, if Illumination did Dungeons and Dragons, I would probably like it a lot less than.
100%.
I'm bummed that so much of movies made directly for kids are just CG animation. Like, I wish there was more variety for them. So my pick is a movie that I think a lot of people won't think is watchable. But if you do get on its wavelength, then I think you could enjoy it. Mine's What Happens Later, which is a Meg Ryan directed romantic comedy of sorts, kind of like a maybe drama, more just as much as comedy. But it sort of does basically, in a nutshell, what it is two people are almost in like this relationship purgatory in an airport terminal, and they're doing a post-mortem on their relationship after not having seen each other for 25 years. David Duchovny is the other actor in it. It sort of does the reverse Stop Making Sense, where you have less band members as the movie goes along, to the point where you're just with Duchovny and Meg Ryan. I think it's just super interesting. It has like a weird kind of dreamlike Twilight Zone-y vibe to it, just as much as being a romantic comedy. I don't think Meg Ryan has missed a beat in her time away from being a romantic comedy lead. And I also just appreciate the fact that, she dedicates the movie to Nora Ephron. And I'm not saying like she was impatient and like just kind of jonesing to do something like this while she was in those Nora Ephron movies. But I think that it's interesting that her way of directing or being the author of a romantic comedy is so different than Nora Ephron's. She's not just trying to like retrace steps of her past glories. She's trying something new. This is obvious. I think it came from a play. It definitely feels like stage bound. Obviously, it's like one of those pieces of material that an artist sees and they just like have to, it becomes part of their bones and they just need to do it themselves. So from like a personal stamp of like who Meg Ryan is as an artist, I think it's really interesting.
Yeah, I was watching it and I got about half an hour into it and I started doing my, the Wikipedia drift where eventually like you start to be like, wait, what's going on here? And when I saw it came from a stage play, I was like, oh, I can see like in my head, I can see the theater. I can see the two chairs. Like it's just nothing else on the stage, just two chairs, and they just move back and forth. Like you can see the construction, how conducive it would be to the stage. I give this movie all the credit in the world for just these two, like Duchovny and Meg Ryan, just having fun together. I like some of those sort of more surreal elements. I like the idea of the empty airport with the announcer and all that. Like some of that stuff kind of speaks to my kind of sensibilities too. I don't think I'm as enamored with the movie as you are, but I do think that there's a lot of really good stuff in there.
Yeah, for sure. I found the movie like equal parts charming and frustrating. I was very charmed by the performances, obviously, because these two are great together. And then they would call each other W. Davis, and I would be like, "Oh, that's such screenwriter bullshit," and or playwright bullshit. I guess I should correct myself. But I really like the fact that Meg Ryan does this sort of romantic comedy, dramedy, whatever you want to call it, that is much more interested in sort of leaning into being a fantasy than if she had just made a movie where like, oh, they gotta switch apartments and there's a misunderstanding. If she had just done sort of a straightforward bad Nora Ephron riff, I wouldn't like this movie at all. And so the fact that it's willing to be kind of weird and pseudo experimental, Adam, when you saw it, you kind of compared it to a John Patrick Shanley piece, and I was like, oh, I totally see that. And that's the stuff I really liked about the movie, outside of the performances of the whole thing.
I had one more thought and then a question for you guys, maybe to wrap us up. So one thing I do like about the movie is its sort of opinion about the concept of closure in a relationship, which is that there really sometimes never is complete closure. And also, if to get more closure, you need a lot of time. So like when people sometimes are, freshly broken up, or like it's been a few months, they're just like, oh, I want to see them again for closure and stuff. It's like, no, you're too close to it. Like you're not going to get that wisdom for years. And I like that this is sort of taking that opinion that it, 25 years later, it's still raw when you scratch
Yeah.
at it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
My question for you though is because, and I wouldn't trade the Duchovny performance for anything because I think it's really good and it's different from what he usually does sometimes. But Tom Hanks, if this is Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan together, I think it adds another element of, because their movies together. I almost said pictures. I'm getting ready for top 10. So their movies together are so informed by Happily Ever After and them kind of getting together at the infancy stage of a relationship. I would be curious to see like them as a couple that have eventually drifted apart and like it didn't work out, and what we think about them 25 years later.
It definitely bumps it up a star and becomes like an interesting sort of meta text about the romantic comedy, but I don't want their potentially last movie together to be before midnight, where it's like, oh, I wanted to see them end up happy together at the end of You've Got Mail. I don't want to find out 25 years later that
Didn't work out.
they split up.
What if it's less depressing, like Revolutionary Road? So this was great. Thank you so much, you guys. I love doing these Lumps of Coal episodes. And it's welcome to 2024. Get your stretches in. We will be back next week with Rob and my most anticipated movies of 2024. So until next time.
These seats are both Dungeons and Dragons. Figure that out.